Stepping into the building housing the company with palpable nervousness. As I meet with the president, I repeatedly reimagine the apology I've thought so hard about, hoping it comes across as genuine. My entire body turns icy cold, and my knees weaken, and my heart seems to beat much harder than usual. I force a smile onto my twitching lips, open the door, and greet everyone in a loud voice. Good morning. I apologize sincerely for my impoliteness yesterday. I bow my head deeply and can feel the gaze of those around me. Are you the one who missed the company entrance ceremony yesterday? You really lack common sense. A low, heavy voice echoes through the office. It's President Tony. I lift my head and he's glaring at me with an expression that makes it clear he's in a bad mood. The moment I try to make an excuse, I'm cut off. If you're still in a student mindset, then quit. We don't need you here. Suddenly, everything goes black before my eyes. After a long struggle, I was finally able to join the company, but now I feel pitiful and depressed. What am I doing? I come from a single mother household. My mother worked multiple jobs to ensure I never lacked anything, and she managed to see me through high school. I wanted to repay her kindness, so I planned to find a job right after high school, but she said, "If you truly want to start working right after graduating high school, then I won't say anything. But if you have even the slightest desire to go to university, then you should. Don't worry about the money. We'll manage somehow." Encouraged by her words, I decided to go to university. To minimize the financial burden on my mother, I applied for as many scholarships as possible and took out student loans. I intended to help support our household while attending university and working part-time, but the reality was that I was barely able to maintain my living expenses. I wanted to find a job as soon as possible to ease my mother's burden, but my job hunting, which started in April of my third year, did not go well, and I was constantly receiving rejections. I was even more depressed when some companies, from which I received no contact after taking their job examinations, only informed me of my rejection when I inquired myself. Amid all this, I finally received a job offer from this company. I was filled with hope and was determined to work hard. However, for some reason, I couldn't attend the entrance ceremony. You've grown up and become a member of society. On the morning of the company entrance ceremony, my mother reminisced about when I was little. To hide my embarrassment, I pretended to be annoyed in response. Come on, stop repeating the same thing. While thinking about how happy I was and how long I had waited for this day, I decided to leave home early so as not to be late. The path to the station leads along a riverbank, where you can often see people walking their dogs or jogging. But this morning, unusually, there were no people around. As I was walking and taking in the fresh air, I heard a small scream accompanied by the sound of splashing water. When I looked towards the riverbank, I saw a small girl struggling in the water. I was shocked by the unexpected sight and froze, but unconsciously I started running towards the river. I threw off my jacket and tossed aside my bag before jumping into the river. I had been a member of the swimming club during my school days, so I was confident in swimming, but I didn't expect swimming with clothes on to be so challenging. Still, I frantically moved my arms and legs, inching closer to the little girl. The girl was already exhausted, and there was no strength left in her movements. As soon as she began to sink when I was just about to reach her, I dove and hoisted her limp body. I thought she would float a bit because of buoyancy, but the small girl was as heavy as lead. She had already lost consciousness. After getting out of the river, I immediately called an ambulance and looked around to see if anyone could help. I spotted an AED sign on a nearby warehouse and dashed to get the device. Although I had taken AED training during university, this was my first time actually using it. Still, the thought of saving a life that might be on the brink of expiring right before my eyes ran through my head. I attached the pediatric pads to the girl and pressed the switch. Praying for the ambulance to arrive quickly, I tirelessly performed CPR. In the meantime, people passed by, walking their dogs or jogging. Although they looked concerned, they passed by with an air of not wanting to get involved. The thought of this girl possibly dying if I hadn't noticed and helped her made me shudder. I didn't know how much time had passed, but when the ambulance arrived with its blaring siren, the paramedics promptly checked the girl's condition. They also checked the girl's belongings to see if there was anything that could lead them to contact her family, but unfortunately, there was nothing to indicate such. Worried about the girl's condition, I decided to accompany her in the ambulance. However, as I got into the ambulance, covered with a blanket, I was jolted back to reality. Damn, it's my company's entrance ceremony today. What have I been doing? When I checked my wristwatch, I saw that the water from the river had gotten inside, and I couldn't tell the time. I quickly pulled out my phone from my bag, and when I checked the time, the start time for the entrance ceremony had already passed. I finally got this job! Feeling regret and at the same time shivering with the gravity of missing the entrance ceremony overwhelmed me. I hurriedly called my company upon arrival at the hospital, apologizing for not being able to attend the entrance ceremony due to circumstances. I also explained the situation and apologized via email, but the anxiety did not disappear when thinking about what would happen from now on. Even so, I couldn't leave this place. I was holding the hand of the sleeping girl in the hospital room all the time. After a while, I noticed her hand twitching, and when I looked at her, she slowly opened her eyelids. Where am I? Her weak voice was a relief. I immediately pressed the nurse call, and the doctor checked her and told me she was fine. I breathed a deep sigh of relief. You were drowning in the river. As I explained the situation, the girl started crying. I couldn't reach my mom's place. She told me the situation while crying. Her mother had passed away, and she jumped into the river to go see her mother. When I asked her age, she said she was 9 years old. I quickly told her about myself. You know, when I was about your age, my father got sick and died. My relationship with my father was not what you would call a close parent-child relationship. On days when my father was working, he would come home after I went to bed, and on his days off, he would watch TV or read the newspaper and didn't pay much attention to me. There were a few times when he would play catch or soccer with me on his days off, or take me to the zoo. However, when I think that I will never spend time with my father again, I feel sad and regret that I didn't value our time together more. Even though I was always sad and shut myself off because my father wasn't there, I realized that I had to live my life and walk my own path. Otherwise, my father would worry about me, right? The girl crying again. Mom, I wonder if Mom is watching and worrying about me. I nodded strongly and said, "Of course she will." "If you can't find her guardian, could you contact me?" I gave my contact information to the nurse and left the hospital, praying for a happy future for the girl. "I was the one who said we don't need you in our company, but your resignation is not due to company circumstances but your own." The president pointed at me and reprimanded me. "I won't be working here and will voluntarily resign." My mother's smiling face flashed in my mind, and I felt a tight squeeze in my chest. At that moment, a pale-faced woman entered. It was the president's secretary. "This is urgent, Mr. President." "What's all the fuss about?" As the president glared at the secretary with a bothered expression, the secretary exclaimed, "It's urgent. We've just received a notification that Representative Eric is visiting here." Even I, who don't know much about politics, have heard that name. He is a prominent politician, currently a serving member of the state legislature and expected to be the strongest candidate in the upcoming gubernatorial election. For the president, who manages a construction company, he would want to establish connections with local dignitaries, and even more so if Eric becomes the next governor. "What's going on? There's no time to be puzzled. This is a good opportunity. Let him in right now." As the president blushed, he glared at me and said, "Hey you! A very important guest is coming to our company. You're a nuisance, so get out of here now." I was completely treated as a hindrance. There was not even a seat prepared for me, so I decided to give up and leave. As I stood at the door, Representative Eric opened it and walked in. His presence was right in front of me, as expected of a revered politician, exuded dignity and a strong aura. "I'm terribly sorry." As I quickly backed away, he suddenly grabbed my hand. "You're Ken, aren't you?" I was taken aback when my name was suddenly called. Yes, but how did you..." While I was puzzled as to why he knew my name, the president and the secretary were also surprised. "Thank you so much for saving Tina. I can't thank you enough." Representative Eric firmly shook my hand and started crying, his shoulders shaking. The girl who tried to kill herself in the river was apparently named Tina. Tina's mother was actually the daughter of Representative Eric, and the whole family had been in mourning since her death. Meanwhile, Representative Eric talked about how he had failed to notice the grief and heartache of losing Tina's mother. Tina seems to be gradually recovering, going to school while still in mourning. And just when they were starting to feel relieved, yesterday, 3 weeks after the funeral, they had received a notification that Tina had not shown up for school. And then when her school bag was found on the way to school, even though there was no contact with the kidnapper, it caused a big commotion, fearing that she might have been abducted. When the search for Tina was in full swing among the people involved, a call came in from the hospital. They rushed over to her immediately. Tina apologized to me over and over, saying I'm sorry. She told me I won't do anything that would make Mom sad anymore. I won't worry you either. I'll do as the brother who saved me told me. Feeling that what I had told Tina in the hospital room had been conveyed properly, my heart warmed. The president, who was listening to the story, suddenly spoke to Mr. Eric in a petting voice. "Mr. Eric, don't our employees make us proud? It's wonder that your granddaughter's life was saved. Ken here is a lifesaver. Going forward, could you perhaps grant us some favors?" I was speechless at the quick change in the CEO. who had been threatening me just a while ago. Mr. Tony, I practice clean politics. Also, I heard what you were saying in the hallway. You were going to fire Mr. Ken, weren't you? Asked Mr. Tony cringed. It's shocking to find a CEO in this world who would fire someone who chose to help another person, a choice that could have put their own life at risk. As Mr. Eric, emitting a strong aura, spoke these heavy words, the CEO seemed to be overwhelmed. Do I look like that kind of CEO to you? There's no way I could do such a thing. Later, I was invited to Mr. Eric's home. When I went to the given address, there stood a mansion so grand that it was overwhelming. I truly felt like he was a politician aiming to become governor. Even though it was only one station away from my house, I never knew he lived so close. As I stood there, Big brother, thank you for saving me. Tina, with her hair neatly tied back and wearing a cute dress, came to greet me at the entrance. Seeing her, I was genuinely glad that she had survived. Tina took my hand and led me into the living room, where a man in a suit, despite being indoors, walked up and bowed deeply. I am Tina's father. I don't know how to express my gratitude, but thank you very much for saving my daughter. He turned out to be Mr. Eric's chief secretary, Mr. Eric Cumming. Ken, please have a seat. Go ahead. Feeling out of place, I sat in the chair as invited, and in response to Mr. Eric's questions, talked about my life up until now. Actually, I too was raised in a single-mother household. My mother worked hard to support me, so I empathize greatly with your circumstances. According to the congressman, after graduating from junior high school, he worked while attending night school and managed to go to college. It's not like I had decided to become a politician from the start. I saw people's hardships, though it was an unreasonable world, and wanted to make a world where I could save the weak. So I thought it would be better to become a congressman. The journey up until now has been long. Mr. Eric even shared some bitter experiences from his early days as a congressman. All I wanted was to relieve my mother of her hardships and not cause her any trouble. I had never thought about changing the world. Now, having heard your story, Mr. Eric, I am deeply impressed. In response to my words, Mr. Eric said, If you're interested in my work, would you like to work together and give your best shot? I stared at Mr. Eric's face. Although I narrowly avoided being fired from my previous job thanks to him, I was faced with daily unpaid overtime, working on holidays, and unclear responsibilities passed down by senior colleagues. Dealing with ongoing harassment at work, my motivation had recently been declining. It made me reconsider my life and left me troubled. Yes, please, I'd really appreciate it. Afterward, I became Mr. Eric's second secretary, getting involved in politics. My mother listened to the details of the story, surprised, and said, Oh, I see. So such things happen. Indeed, God must be watching over us. And the connection between people are truly mysterious, aren't they? As for my previous workplace, news had surfaced about the involvement of the CEO and politicians in the favoritism scandal, hoping to bring about a transformation in such a world. I strongly wished for Mr. Eric to become the next governor. The election campaign for the gubernatorial race was exhausting, with each day filled with relentless busyness. From morning till midnight, we moved around tirelessly, working together with everyone to achieve the goal of making Mr. Eric the governor. It was an immensely rewarding experience. I felt anxious until it was confirmed that Eric had secured the governorship. But when the report of his victory came out, everyone embraced each other while crying tears of joy. I had never experienced such excitement before, neither during my student days nor throughout my life. Tina was also at the campaign office, and when she learned of the victory, she said, "Congratulations, Grandpa!" She handed a bouquet of celebratory flowers with a smile. Mr. Eric received it with a beaming smile and lifted her up in his arms. I reflected once again on how I had missed the entrance ceremony and found me standing at the edge of life, and how a meeting he had opened up a different path in life for me. I vowed to cherish this connection that God had given me and to do my best under His guidance.